right. We got with us today the youth in the room. Where are the youth in the room? Make some noise, youth in the room. Okay. Good job. Don't make any more noise today. I'm not kidding. I was going to say I was kidding. I'm not. So the reason they're here with us is yesterday, work began on what is going to be King Street Cafe. So we are super pumped about that. We tore down some walls and made a giant mess, which is the only part I'm qualified to help with. So I was enjoying that. So check this out, though. Earlier this week, I was in there kind of doing some different things, and people just keep coming in, and I keep forgetting to lock the door. So people keep coming in, and most of them are menu requests. Literally, we have a 100-page menu now if I say yes to every single thing that people are requesting. But this guy came in, and I know him, and he's a little bit, if you have any church background at all, he's of a more charismatic theological persuasion, maybe. So he's a little bit more boisterous. And we started talking, and he goes, "Can I pray for you?" And I'm a pastor, so I have to say yes to that. I was like, "I'm just trying to pick paint colors out, but okay, yeah, we'll do that." And this dude puts his hand on my chest and starts praying, and man, what he would call it, and again, I don't know where you're at with all this stuff, what he would call what he was doing, like a little bit of prophecy. And he said to me in this prayer that he saw King Street Cafe becoming like the well where the woman at the well was met by Jesus. And it was where somebody would come in for one thing and experience something unexpected spiritually. Man, I was just like, I am now also charismatic. So it really did impact me. It's weird because I don't know if you've ever had it happen where in the moment I was just kind of there, but that one had roots and it's gotten down into me. And I really see the way God's going to use this space. So if you're interested in helping out more with that, we will have a couple more work days. It gets a little more advanced from here. Sledgehammer Day's over. Sorry you missed it. But if you want to be notified when we're going to have more things going on, that QR code on the back of the seats, you can scan that, and there is a spot where you can get more information about King Street Cafe. If you can make those days. And the other thing you can help with, and if this is just your first time here, just turn yours off. I never want you to feel like we're asking for anything of you. We want this to be for you. We don't want anything from you. But if you're looking for more ways to get involved with King Street Cafe, one of the big things is financially. We definitely still need your support there. It costs money to do stuff. Just so you know, I'm doing the best I can to ask for everything for free, but weirdly, people are not saying yes to that. So a couple, but not everybody. So if God's been nudging you to support this new dream financially, say yes to that. Jump on there and be a part of it. We need your support. All right, if you're a first-time guest, you can turn your ears back on. We are starting a series today called So You Want to Change the World. We're going to look at the story of Nehemiah. I want to start with a question, though. What do you think? What do you think it means to waste your life? What do you think it means to waste your life? I think the way that question would be answered if you asked our culture at large, what does it mean to waste your life? There'd be a lot of different ways they'd try to answer that, right? Sometimes people talk about somebody who stuck in addiction, can't get out of addiction. Oh, it's just a waste. Or maybe they'd say something about somebody who doesn't live up to purpose. Or doesn't live up to potential. That's just a waste. Or someone who. Sometimes it's somebody who gets stuck in the mundane, you're just doing the same thing. You don't take any risks, you didn't jump out of an airplane or kiss the love of your life at the top of the Eiffel Tower or something like that. That was a wasted life because you just played it safe your whole life, right? Some people would answer like that. Spend your whole life on the couch, scrolling on a screen, wasted life. I think a popular answer these days would be like somebody who doesn't live up to their true self or something like that, right? Like you kind of live your life pretending the whole time, and that would be a waste. And I think a lot of those maybe have pieces of the truth, but they're not the whole thing. So like when we talk about wasting anything, usually what we mean is that the thing didn't do what it was supposed to do. Right? Isn't that what we mean when you say waste, right? If you throw away food and all those vegetables that you bought, they sit down in the bottom of your refrigerator and you pull them out and you come over here and you just throw them in the trash can and then you put the new ones that you just bought in there to be thrown away in a week. You're whispering to yourself as you're throwing them away, what a waste. And what you mean is they didn't do the thing they were intended to do, right? Or if you went and saw a crappy movie and you walk out and I just wasted 2 hours of my life. What you mean is that the movie didn't do the thing that you wanted it to do. It didn't fulfill its purpose. So I really do think the best definition of a wasted life is one that does not live up to the purpose it was meant to have. Purpose. And by the way, purpose implies design, right? Because if everything's just random, there is no purpose. It just is, right? So purpose implies design. Design, by the way, implies a creator. Right? And I love whenever anybody talks about something that, it's designed to work that way, when they're talking about like the human body or something out in nature that it was designed to work a certain way. I always, sitting next to my wife on the couch, I'll always be like, by who? By who? Who is this designer that they speak of? And purpose implies a plan. That the designer had a plan for the thing, an idea for the thing, for it to live out. So I believe you were created like on purpose. You're not an accident, and for a purpose. So I don't care what your origins are. There are no such thing as illegitimate children. There may be illegitimate parents, but there's no illegitimate children. So I don't care how you came into existence. I believe that was God's plan and that he has a plan for your life. Your life was meant to matter. Your life was meant to matter. I want to read one of the verses that you can just impact you in the soul the most, I think, in the Bible. I got to read it I want to read the first two verses, and then the one that we always skip. You've probably, if you grew up in church, you've heard these first two. You maybe even had to memorize the first two, but we always leave the last verse off, and I really think I'd like to keep all three together. So I'll start at Ephesians 2, 8, and 9. So again, if you grew up in church, you probably know this one. God saved you by his grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we've done, so none of us can boast about it. So these two are huge, massive, gospel-packed verses here. This says that your relationship with God is not based off of what you do, but on what Jesus did, right? So you're saved by God's grace through your faith. Those two things coming together, and that's where your salvation comes from. It's what Jesus did on the cross, not what you've done in your life, right? So, this is the best definition of a Christian. We always get caught up in doing all these good things. It's about having faith in Jesus. That's what these verses say. And by the way, I wanted to throw this out there. I've had so many different conversations with people. Like whenever we baptize somebody, I have people come up to me like, oh man, I feel like I'm supposed to do that. But there's always this hesitancy, and some of it's just I don't want to talk in front of people and you just need to get over it. But other stuff, like they feel like they got to clean up first. Like they got to get their life together first. And I just want you to know, the way we think about that is that when you do what these verses said, you're saved by grace when you believed, the next step is to get in that water. You don't have to clean up to get in that water. There's no requirements for your life. If you say, I trust in Jesus, then you go under that water and come back up, and we believe God's going to go to work on. That's a starting point. So there's not some moral requirement for you to get in the water, just so you know. So if you're waiting to get stuff together, that's not the way we think about it. So what I'm saying is, some of you are sitting here waiting to get baptized, and you should after service, you should walk out there and go sign up for it. Okay, good. You're on the same page. All right. But the next verse, this is the one we leave out. So yes, I understand Ephesians 2, 8, 9, some of the most important verses in the Bible that there is. It really is. But you can't leave 10, because 10, it almost glows a little bit. I don't know how to describe it. Listen to this verse. For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. So that's crazy. That verse says that you are a masterpiece of God. And maybe when you woke up this morning, you looked in the mirror, you weren't feeling very masterpiece-ish. I don't know. Maybe you feel like God had an off day or something with you, or he smudged something. I don't know. But this verse says that you are a masterpiece. God doesn't make mistakes like that. You are a masterpiece. And then it says that you were created anew in Jesus. So not only were you created a masterpiece, but then when you come to faith in Jesus, there's even a renewal of that something happens on the inside and he starts to change you from the inside out. And that's the way we believe it works. You don't clean yourself up before you come to Jesus. You come to Jesus and then he cleans you up. Creates you anew. And then says that in some way, this relationship with Jesus is like a gateway to the purpose that you were created for. Planned long ago. That's pretty cool, long ago. What do you think it means, long ago? Like that's eternity past stuff, right? That's before God even created the world stuff, where God is in eons going into the past, and he was making a plan for how this whole thing was going to go, and he thought about you. And you're like in God's playbook somewhere, and he thought about you and the role you would play in his cosmic plan for this whole creation. That's a little bit staggering, isn't it? That your life it almost like drips with destiny a little bit. That God had prepared, planned for things for you to live out on this earth. That's pretty cool. You guys feeling that in middle school yet? No? No, I told you to be quiet. Good job. That was a test. It's always the one that's your progeny that's the troublemaker. So the goal, if we say, hey, I don't want to waste my life, the goal is to live up to your destiny. That thing that God planned in eternity past, that you want to live in that, right? The good things that were planned for you long ago, I want to find out what those are and I want to live them. That's the goal. That's what it would mean to not waste your life. So we're starting this series today called So You Want to Change the World. And I think that's a part of it. See, that's the thing. I think that you are created to, in some way, change the world. That you are supposed to leave an impact in this world. And we're going to look at a guy who definitely did, Nehemiah. Now, before we jump in, I have like 6 little addendums before we actually read the first verse. Last week, so if you were here last week, I know you memorized my sermon, so you're good on this. But if you weren't here, I want to remind or kind of let you in on what we talked about. We talked about last week the thing that happens before you find out your purpose. Like there's a prerequisite to finding out your purpose. And this quick version is that you say yes to your purpose before you find out what it is. If you're holding out on God, I want to find out what my purpose is before I say yes to it, you're not going to find it out. But you have to come to this place where you just open up, you got to unwrap your fingers from around your life and say, okay, God, here it is. You write God a blank check and you say, here, God, here, I want to do whatever it is you created me to do. There's a pre-surrender before you even find out the thing. And that's like the entranceway in. So I'm assuming that today. And that, I think really highly of you to say that I only preached it once and I just think you got it. And we're going to move on to step 2 here. So I'm assuming that sometime in the last 7 days, you completely surrendered your entire life to Jesus. Is that, okay, cool. And now we're going to go and we're going to talk about some ways for you to discover your purpose, like what that actually looks like. Your hand's already open. You've already submitted your life to Jesus. Now we're moving on to find out how. Now, so Nehemiah, quick backstory on Nehemiah. 140 years before Nehemiah chapter 1, which we're about to read, the country of Babylon conquered the nation of Israel. So Babylon comes in, conquers, and specifically Jerusalem. They come into Jerusalem, the capital city, and they destroy the temple. They tear down the walls around the city. They leave Jerusalem a smoking pile of rubble, and they kill a lot of Jewish people. And then some of the Jewish people that they take captive, and they take them back to Babylon. So there's a group of Israelites, a group of Jewish people who are taken captive to Babylon. So they're in Babylon now. And then, crazy thing, Babylon gets conquered by a country called Persia. So now the Israelites are like double captive because they were captive, and then the nation they were captive of is now captive, so they're like a couple layers deep. And that is the situation that we find Nehemiah in. He is a Jewish man in captivity in Persia. And that's where this book picks up. So Nehemiah 1, verse 1. In late autumn, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was at the fortress of Susa. Hanani, one of my brothers, came to visit me with some other men who had just arrived from Judah. I asked them about the Jews who had returned there from captivity and how things were going in Jerusalem. They said to me, things are not going well for those who return to the promise of Judah. They are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down and the gates have been destroyed by fire. So what happens here in these first three verses, Nehemiah is in Persia, in the capital city of Susa. His bro comes and visits him, and he's like, hey, so how's it going? Because some of the Jewish people who were in captivity have been allowed to return, which is a really cool thing. It's actually crazy that the king of Persia is actually letting this happen. So he's getting this report, like, so hey, some people are going back. How's it going? And his brother's like, really, really bad. Jerusalem's just destroyed. It's just destroyed. So they have this little conversation. The next verse tells us how Nehemiah reacts to this news. And here's what it says. When I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days, I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. Now, that doesn't make sense. The reaction Nehemiah is having here doesn't make sense. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, he just heard that the capital city of his home country got destroyed. Like, of course he's upset. Like, you'd be upset if you found out that Washington, D.C. just got, like, wiped off the map, right? You would be, yes, you would be. It'd take you a minute, you'd be like, you'd have evil thoughts about things, and then you'd come around and be like, that's upsetting. Our capital city's destroyed. But that's not what happened here. Nehemiah is not like reading this on a news app. Jerusalem being destroyed isn't like a news thing. It's more of a history book thing. What I'm saying is he already knew. He already knew that Jerusalem was destroyed. So when his brother comes and says Jerusalem's destroyed, it'd be like the same as me coming up to him and be like, hey, I got to tell you this, but like, did you guys hear about the Battle of Gettysburg? And for you, like, think of it, 51,000 troops died. And that would be like you just collapsing in tears right here over that. That, like, if you, like, read about it, like, that is a horrible tragedy. It was a horrible thing. But, like, for you to be able to emotionally connect with it, it happened 150 years ago. We just kind of, stuff like that doesn't hit us like that. But Nehemiah just crumbles at this news. And it's not news. He already knew it. So why is he so messed up about it? Why is he weeping? Why is he mourning and fasting and praying for days over something happened 150 years ago? So I want to show you something. I want to fast forward in time a little bit to Jesus. I want to show you one verse about Jesus. Luke 19:41 says this. But as he, Jesus, came closer to Jerusalem and saw the city ahead, he began to weep. I think that's important. I see a connection here. Nehemiah is weeping over the city of Jerusalem, so did Jesus. I think this shows you something about your purpose. That, like, what God's going to do with you, again, if you have your hand open, like, God, I want you to use me. I want to know my purpose in my life. I want to submit to you. One of the things he's going to do is give you the same heart that he has for things. Jesus weeps over Jerusalem. Nehemiah weeps over Jerusalem. What God is doing, again, this isn't new information. This isn't like some, oh my goodness. This is God beginning to give Nehemiah the same heart for Jerusalem that he has. God's starting to knit together Nehemiah's heart and God's heart. So if you're looking for purpose, if you genuinely want to know why God created you, that Ephesians 2:10 verse, like what are these good things that you thought about long ago for my life? I think one of the things you could start to pray like ask God to like move in your heart. Like ask God to mess you up a little bit. And it's not like a fun prayer to pray, hey God, disturb me, mess me up about something. But I think this is what Nehemiah's, his first encounter with purpose here is he kind of breaks a little bit on the inside. And I just want to point that out. If you look at the people who have like a strong purpose in their life, most of the time, like the first scent of purpose is actually a problem that they see. It's something that's wrong with the world that they see. They get more upset about that thing than other people do. They get more angry about the thing, more sad about the thing than other people do. And that's kind of their first encounter with the thing that is going to be their purpose. So ask God to mess you up. Ask God to give you the same heart he has for something, whatever it is that he wants to lay on your heart. So I'd say 2 questions you could ask yourself. What makes me sad and what makes me mad? Those, if you're, again, looking for purpose, I would start there. What are the things that tick you off more than most people? What are the things that make you more sad than most people? And I don't mean Christmas Hallmark movies or sitting in traffic. I don't mean that stuff. I mean when you look at the world and you see that the world is not operating in a way that like produces human flourishing. When you see the things that are off, the things that are wrong, and for some reason this one thing affects you more than maybe other people, that might be an indicator that God wants to do something there. Like, most of us, if we see somebody standing on the side of the road asking for money, we just drive by or pretend to be playing with our radio. But like, some people, man, when they see that, they're jacked up by that. And for me, that's something that God wants to do with you. Or maybe it'd be like the foster care system. Maybe that hits you in the heart harder than most people. Maybe it's people who are stuck in addiction. Maybe that really moves you. Maybe it's education or poverty or hunger or seeing broken marriages. It could be anything. God could put something in your path that just messes you up more than most people. For me, it was church. I used to get really mad in church. And here's the thing, I just need you to know this. I thought something was wrong with me, and you may have the same kind of thing. I thought something was wrong with me because I would get really mad about church. And I still can. If you want to fire me up, come talk to me about a church that like doesn't care about the people outside of it. Like people who only care about the people who are already going there and don't really care about people. They'll put everyone welcome on their sign, but they don't mean that. If they put it on the sign, they for sure don't mean that, just so you know. Anytime a church says everyone welcome, it's for sure a lie. Because you have to say, anyways, see, here I go. I'm going to start saying things that I shouldn't say because this really ticks me off. And then if you really, really want to make me mad, show me a church that doesn't care about anybody outside its 4 walls that has money. Then I'll get really ticked off. Because how dare they have resources that God has given them and not use them for God's mission and to build God's kingdom? I just lose it. I say all kinds of things that are not Christian or pastorly, and I talk about like having this ministry of murdering churches and stuff like that. It's awful. It's awful. It's a really me and Jonathan. We have a business plan. We'll reveal it later. He's ducking down. He doesn't want to be a part of it. Fine, you're not my business partner anymore. I'll do it by myself. But the other thing, so like when I started in church, the other thing that would irritate me to death is when the whole church service was designed in such a way that somebody walking in who like wasn't a Christian or didn't grow up in church would have no idea what's going on. Like that would make me so mad when like they'd use high and lofty theological terms and just assume that you know what the heck they're talking about. That made me so mad. I would, because then I'm like, I'm supposed to invite my friends who don't know this when you don't even care about my friend because you're not even going to talk to them. Like I got so angry about that stuff to the point that I actually thought something was wrong with me. I'm like, you're not a good Christian. I don't know, like something that you hate church. Why do you hate church? Like that's a weird thing for a Christian to say. I even said it to my wife this week. Like, man, but it wasn't an indicator that I was supposed to push away from it. It was actually an indicator that I was supposed to lean into it, that God was showing me things, moving me the same way he like moved Nehemiah here, that I was supposed to do something about that he was planting seeds of purpose that started as anger, and I was supposed to move on that. So sad and mad, those can be cues. Those can be signs. Those can be paths to purpose. So here's Nehemiah. He hears about Jerusalem. even though he already heard about Jerusalem, and he's moved on the inside by what's happening, and then he prays. Now, he already told us that he prayed for days. We only have a couple of verses worth of a prayer, so we know he prayed more than this. But I do want to read it to you because I think it's a really powerful thing, what he prays here. So starting in verse 5, I just want to go through this. Then I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of unfailing love with those who love him and obey his commands. Listen to my prayer. Look down and see me praying day and night for your people Israel. I confess that we've sinned against you. Yes, even my own family and I have sinned. We have sinned terribly by not obeying the commands, decrees, and regulations that you gave us through your servant Moses. So the first thing he's doing here is kind of just defining reality. Hey, this is it. And he's owning some stuff, right? He knows that he's a part of the thing that's wrong. And then he says this, please remember what you told your servant Moses. If you're unfaithful to me, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commandments and live by them, then even if you are exiled to the ends of the earth, I will bring you back to the place I've chosen for my name to be honored. The people who you rescued by your great power and strong hand are your servants. O Lord, please hear my prayer. Listen to the prayers of those of us who delight in honoring you. And here's his ask. That whole thing was a setup. Here's what he's actually asking for. Please grant me success today by making the king favorable to me. Put it in his heart to be kind to me. Now, that's a prayer right there, right? Some of you reading that, you're like, I would never talk to God like that. Like, he's like all demanding and like, hey, God, you said that you were going to do this thing. Like, he's a little bit like, it comes off almost like, well, you said you were going to do this, so you have to. Kind of like my kids do to me sometimes. It's weird. But this prayer, I'm going to start with the premise that God says yes to it. So I want to say that whatever he's doing in here seemed to be accepted by God. So one, he acknowledges reality. It's just like, hey, this is what it is. Israel's messed up. I've messed up. And there's a little bit of like built-in like repentance there, right? Like he's messed up and he's like owning that. Like, God, I want to see change in the world. I also want to see change in me. That's going to be a part of it too, right? You know that your purpose isn't just going to be something out here, that he usually works in you before he works through you, that he's going to go to work on you in here before he goes to work out here through you. And that's what Nehemiah is kind of acknowledging here. And then he like reminds God of God's promises, which is weird. And I want to say that maybe what's happening here is he's not reminding God because God's not like that. He didn't like lose his notes on this part of what he said. But maybe Nehemiah is reminding himself what God said. He's reminding himself of God's promises. And I think that's important in our lives too. You're going to have to preach to yourself sometimes. Like, God said this, God promised this. Like, you're going to have to do that. And then he makes his ask. Grant me success today by making the king favorable to me and put in his heart to be kind to me. If you know what he's going to ask, you know how big of a thing that is. If you know this story, this is a big, massive, bold prayer. Because spoiler alert, talk more about this next week, but what he's going to do is he's going to walk into the court of a foreign king and ask that king if he can go repair the city of his home country that currently that king rules over because he conquered the nation that conquered the nation. And he's going to ask that king to pay the bill to do it. So when he asks God, make the king favorable to me, he's about to ask this king for a multi-million-dollar project that the king should really have no interest in at all. And he's saying, hey, God, do this thing. Do this thing. Big, huge, bold prayer. So I want to ask, what are the size of your prayers? What are the size of your prayers? You know what I do sometimes? It's just so stupid. It's so stupid. I hedge my prayers. I pray realistic prayers, reasonable prayers, me-sized prayers. And the worst part of it is that I pray that, and then I have this attitude like I'm doing God a favor by praying something little. Like God's up in heaven going, whoo, happy he didn't pray the big thing. We would have had like mortgage heaven or something like that, take the gold that we were going to make the streets with and like use it to pay for that thing, but he didn't ask. Like God's somehow overwhelmed by the request. That's the opposite, by the way. I act like I'm being polite by not asking God for a big thing, but with God, that's the opposite. So if you're asking somebody who has a limited resources, limited time to do something for you for a favor, it makes sense for you to not be obnoxious and ask for something overly big, because that would be rude to them because they're limited. But our God isn't limited, so that rule doesn't really apply to him. So actually asking small of God is a little bit more of an insult to God than asking big, right? If God is unlimited and God can do anything, for you to ask something small actually kind of speaks to a low view of him. You ask small things of God, you kind of believe in a small God. So I've been challenged lately, like, stop praying so small. I look at Nehemiah's request here, this is outrageous. But he asks anyways. Small prayers don't honor God, big, bold prayers honor God, and I think God honors big, bold prayers. So when you're pursuing purpose, when you're in this journey, if that's where you feel like you are, like trying to find out purpose, I think one of the necessary ingredients in the pot is big, bold prayers, because God's going to do way more than you think. Even if you think you're praying big, bold prayers, God will still do more than even that. But you have to include in this journey praying for big, bold things that are bigger than you. Your purpose is going to be bigger than you. All right, I want to make one more observation about purpose. And it's not like explicit in this chapter, but if you look at the chapter, you can see this. It's implied. Nehemiah is currently in the city of Susa, Persia, right? But we just learned that he feels like he's called to the city of Jerusalem. If you look at a map, Jerusalem is about 1,000 miles from Susa. That's a crazy thing. It's not quite. It depends on what road you took. 1,000 miles, 1,000 miles. From where he is to where he feels like God is calling him. 1,000 miles. Now, you got to put yourself in his shoes here, because here's my guess with some of the ways we think and how we operate and how we think about God. The distance between where he was and where he felt called was huge. And I feel like a lot of times, if you felt the same way, you would use the distance between where you are and where you felt called to like argue with yourself. Like you would sit here in Susa and go, Jerusalem's 1,000 miles away. Maybe I'm not hearing from God here. Maybe it was the pizza I ate last night or something. Like maybe this isn't the thing that really God's calling me to. There's no way. Or you would start kind of arguing with God, like, God, if you really wanted me to do something in Jerusalem, then you'd put me in Jerusalem and I'm not there. So like, obviously this can't be a thing. Like you would use the distance to talk yourself out of the purpose. But what I want you to see with Nehemiah, and this is absolutely amazing, is that where God put him 1,000 miles from his purpose was the provision for the purpose, right? Because if God had just put Nehemiah in Jerusalem and said, fix Jerusalem, it would have been a rough road. He wouldn't have had the authority or the resources to do the thing that God had called him to. All that was in Susa. So here's what I want you to see. Here's what I want you to see. The thing we talked about last week, when you open up your hand and you say, all right, God, do with me what you will. I want your purpose in my life. What I think immediately starts happening is God starts to position you for your purpose. But what you need to know about that is that when God positions you for purpose, it doesn't always feel like you're going towards it. That sometimes you're going to feel like you're going backwards or sideways or doing a lot of wasted motion around this thing that God is calling you to. It's going to feel messy. It's going to feel like stagnant or just completely going the wrong way. And if Nehemiah had been us, he would have said, man, that was cool. I felt like emotional that one night when I was thinking about Jerusalem, but obviously it's not from God, because there's no way God would call me to 1,000 miles from where I am. We would have talked ourselves out of it, but not Nehemiah. He was a little stubborn about this. He believed that even though he was 1,000 miles from the place he was called to, that God was going to do something with that. And man, I want to encourage you in that way. That even that the God positioning you is a painful, angsty thing. It is, man. But you gotta have faith that he's moving. You gotta have faith that God's plan is bigger than what you can possibly see. That even though Nehemiah is 1,000 miles away from the city he's called to, he's exactly where God wanted him. Because that is going to be the thing that opens up the doors to do the thing. Man. It's so important. Some of you are there right now. You're in Susa and you feel like you're supposed to be in Jerusalem. Don't discount Susa. God's going to do something. He's going to do something in Susa. It might be where your provision to do the thing is. Remember elementary school science class? You guys do, because you were like elementary school students like 5 seconds ago. That was mean. You're all boys. I'm allowed to, oh, yeah, hi. I'll be nicer to you. I'll be mean to you. So elementary school science class, we learned about potential energy and kinetic energy. Remember that? So potential energy was energy that wasn't actually happening yet, and then kinetic energy was the thing that's happening. Potential energy, though. Check out Google's definition of this. Potential energy is the stored energy in any object or system by virtue of its position. That the positioning of the thing actually is what gives it the potential energy. And actually, in this case, the further it is from where it's going, the higher the potential energy. You know, the higher up you go from the floor, the higher the potential energy for when it drops. And that, I just want to encourage you, if you feel like you're just really far from the thing that God has for you, that maybe that's not evidence that God's giving up, but maybe that's evidence that he's going to work on something, that he's winding this thing up, that whatever he's doing, no matter how far you feel from it, he's getting to the point where he's going to do something even more spectacular. And what if all the times in your life where you felt like you were supposed to do something and it didn't happen, what if instead of failing, all that happened was you quit before God moved? Like, what if it's not a failure? What if it's we just stopped too early, that we give up too early, that we decide in our head there's no way God could do this, so I'm just going to quit, when in reality God was just winding up. He was building up that potential energy in order to release it. Because if I'm Nehemiah in Susa, I'm real tempted to say that's cool for somebody else, God, but I'm obviously not called to do that. I'm going to give up on that. And he would have missed out on God doing like 20 miracles he would have missed out on by giving up. He could have called it a failure, but it would have just been quitting. Man, don't do that. I don't care how far you feel from whatever God has for you. Don't give up. Don't quit. The story's not over yet. The story's not over yet. Pray with me. Jesus, pray for the person right now who feels like they're far from the thing that you have for them. Lord, I pray that you'd give them like a little spark of faith, that even if there's distance, that means you're doing something, that maybe even the further the distance, the bigger the thing you're going to do is. Lord, I pray for the person who they hear that Ephesians 2:10 verse that says that you planned good things for them long ago, Lord, that they have a hard time believing that. Lord, I pray that you would move in their heart and show them that you thought of them before you even created the world. That their life does drip with destiny, that you have a plan and a purpose for them. Lord, I pray that you would just imbue that into their very soul. Pray that we lift our heads up from these little things that we do in life, Lord, and see that you created for something so much bigger. You're winding up. Pray for a desire to see it out, a desire to see the thing that you've created us to do. Create in us a hunger for it, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray.